Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Dan and Joe Sports Show. As always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.
All right, Joe, I wanted to lead in with the other big news in college baseball. Of course, the biggest story is still Ole Miss winning the national championship for their first one in college baseball, 22 years in the making with Mike Bianco and, of course, Tim Elko and company. But the other big story, and this is really more affecting the future of college baseball, is probably the most recognizable and hottest coaching commodity in America returning home to coach at Florida State, and that's Link Jarrett.
That's right, Dan. Big story. He unseated Tennessee in that Super Regional upset, became the hottest, coaching name on the market potentially. And we see him go to Florida State, which is, of course, advertised as a historic program, but ironically a program without a championship. And so we'll see, how that fit works out and if Link Jarrett can lead them to their first championship.
Well, Joe, what I'm fascinated to see is, a roommate relationship in college can be complicating. Sometimes the roommates that you have that destroys your roommate, it destroys your friendship being roommates. Sometimes you get that friendship back later. Sometimes it's gone forever. Usually I feel like a lot of times when you live with someone, it goes the negative way. However, what I want to find out is where are Link Jarrett and Mike Martin Jr. at right now? They were roommates at Florida State. Of course, Mike Martin Jr. is the son of legendary Florida State coach Mike Martin Sr. that was there for over 30 years. And the reason he got the job is because he played for his dad and was an assistant coach with his dad. And apparently Link Jarrett was his best friend in college and his roommate. And now Link Jarrett is succeeding him at Florida State. So, the question is, are they still friends now? And if they were, did this completely destroy that friendship?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know you had brought up that point before, and it kind of made me pause, for a second about whether Jarrett would take the job at Florida State. And I likened it, to last year when there was talk about Mike Bianco potentially taking the LSU job. At that point, everybody was like, well, if that happens, that's the only way Ole Miss would ever get Cliff Godwin or the coach at Louisville, Dan McDonald, because they're good friends with Mike Bianco. And the speculation was they wouldn't want to come to Ole Miss and Bianco was fired. And so when I look at that example, I was like, there really is something to this coaching roommate friendship fraternity. And so from that angle, to me, it is a little bit of a surprise that Jarrett would still take the job.
Yeah, Joe. My thing is too, is you look at what he's done at Notre Dame. He's built a very steady program. I'm sure a lot of people don't remember that last year in the Super Regionals, they took Mississippi State to 3 games at Dudy Noble Stadium. And of course, Mississippi State was the ultimate national champion last season. And all of those games, if memory serves, were very tight games. And Mississippi State had to gut it out against a very good Notre Dame team then. And so they do that from taking Mississippi State down to the brink at the Super Regional in Starkville to this season beating the clear number 1 team in America and heavy favorite to win the College World Series in Tennessee. And Notre Dame, it's not like they had a 2 in a barbecue. They won a couple games before they got ousted from the College World Series. So, he definitely had things moving in the right direction. And now he's going into a pressure cooker of a program that expects to go to Omaha every year. It's definitely going to be a different environment.
Right. Notre Dame's only been there, a couple of times ever. I think this year was the first time in 20 years, since 2002, that they had been there. And so it was kind of just a joyride. You're happy to be in Omaha. They wanted to make some noise, but, no problem if you don't. Now you've got to be in Omaha just about every year for Florida State. And at some point, there's going to be that added pressure to eventually get over the hump and win a national championship. And so it's really interesting to me. We now have 2 former Notre Dame coaches just walking in, some pretty pressure-packed situation. Also, Brian Kelly, too.
That's right, Joe. And another interesting connection there, we brought up the pressure cooker that is Florida State baseball and Link Jarrett coming from Notre Dame to Florida State. You just brought up LSU. This other coach from Notre Dame that actually took Notre Dame to the College World Series would be one Paul Mainieri, who, of course, was the LSU coach last season before he got fired after having won a national championship and taking LSU to multiple College World Series. So these Notre Dame coaches bail on Notre Dame for what is perceivable greener pastures, but it also comes with a lot more pressure and more expectations. See Paul Maneri, who actually won a national championship and still got fired.
Yeah, it's going to be a different element for Jarrett at Florida State. I'm going to be interested to see a couple of years from now if he regrets or embraces this new job. I will say the transfer portal with the NILs and everything has obviously changed everything. For instance, we talk about LSU. I've already seen where their baseball team, of course, had a disappointing season by their standards, and they're already just working the transfer portal galore. I think they brought in Christian Little, the star transfer from Vanderbilt, a pitcher. They brought in the ACC Freshman of the Year hitter from NC State. So, they're already working wonders. And so I got to think that Link Jarrett coming to Florida State, he's probably not coming by himself. I would think that there's some transfers that will probably be coming into.
Yeah, I would think so, Joe. And he may even get some players from Notre Dame to come to Florida State. Not sure about that. There's always a possibility. And Joe, speaking of the transfer portal, I'd heard today that Southern Miss had 3 of their baseball players enter the transfer portal.
Yeah, it was looking like, everybody's kind of joking that now that Ole Miss and State have won national titles, that it's Southern Miss's turn next year. And they add the pitching staff on paper to compete at that level because, while Ole Miss dominated the Super Regional by score in Hattiesburg, the pitchers performed pretty well in their starts. And I saw today where most notably Hurston Waldrop, who struck out 12 Ole Miss players in his start in the Super Regional, he entered the transfer portal. And so you go from having maybe one of the top returning pitching rotations in the country to kind of an empty cupboard.
Well, Joe, that's the nature of the transfer portal now. Is it's going to be harder for these teams that were the mid majors that were doing so great in baseball and competing to stay at that level, because suddenly they're about to get rated every single offseason. And that's the nature of what we're dealing with right now.
That's right. Absolutely.
But Joe, interestingly, this is obviously a very big contract for Link Jarrett, but it definitely shows the inequities in terms of amount of money put into baseball versus basketball and football. When we're talking about the hottest coaching commodity in America getting a 6-year, $6.5 million deal. I'm not saying that's not a lot of money. Shoot, I wish I was making that kind of money. But, that's by major sports standards in college, you compare it to college basketball, college football, that's not a very big contract. But you look at what Mike Martin Jr. was making at Florida State, he was only making $1.5 million. So it's a significant increase from what he had.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's a relative statement, compared relatively to other college baseball coaches, a significant raise relative, to other major college sports. It's not, and that's the thing about college baseball, that they've obviously grown the game exponentially through the added television coverage through the years. I can remember 15 years ago, you could only watch the Super Regionals and the World Series on TV. Now, you can watch every game, going back to even some of the conference tournaments. So they've come a long way, but still, a long way to go if they're going to increase some of these salaries.
Yeah, that's right, Joe. It definitely is a lot more covered than it used to be. Thinking about Florida State, I sent you a text the other day that talked about it. They've been to, I think, even himself, Mike Martin Sr. had taken Florida State to 17 College World Series. They had been to 25 College World Series, which after Texas is the most College World Series gone to. And of course, they're by far the most College World Series appeared in, not having won a national championship. 5 years from now, God willing that you and I are still doing this show, are we going to have talked about at least one Link Jarrett Florida State national championship in baseball?
I'd like to say yes for his sake, but, the probability to me probably says no. For one thing, it seems like the SEC is winning these just about every year lately. And then the other thing is just, college baseball is so unpredictable. Florida State has this great tradition and consistency of making it to Omaha, but we've seen, especially in recent years, a few teams that rarely get there, like Ole Miss this year, or most notably Coastal Carolina in 2016. In their only appearance, they win the whole thing. And so, unfortunately, probably the odds are against Florida State. But as far as, from their standpoint, they did get the hottest name on the coaching market, so you certainly can't blame them for that.
Well, no, absolutely not. And I mean, you have a guy that played there, learned under Mike Martin Sr., who's the greatest, maybe the greatest coach in all of college sports, never won a national championship. And, you look at what he did at Notre Dame, just an amazing building job there. I'm going to lean towards he does win one. I mean, I think Florida State's a program that's due to win one. The guy's obviously shown his coaching chops. And plus, I just like the way his Notre Dame teams played. They were tough. They didn't ever get worried about an opponent that was much better than them. They didn't flinch at all. They did good, sound baseball, a lot of kind of squeeze plays, small ball, very frustrating opponent to play. And I always felt like, if you were going to beat them, you had to play your best game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, they're definitely always tough. Always one of those teams you don't want to see in a regional, regardless of their seed. Like I can remember years, I feel like, where they haven't even hosted and they've still gotten out of the regional round. Of course, last year when or the year that Mike Martin Sr. was retiring, they had that Cinderella run, went through I think the Baton Rouge Super Regional. Would you say that you like Florida State's chances better than Arkansas, or which of those two that desperately want a championship do you like more?
I think I would lean Arkansas on that. I mean, I still feel like Dave Van Horn has built such a steady program that just keeps knocking on the door. And I don't think that Arkansas is quite at the level of curse that Florida State is yet. I mean, they're starting to get there. I mean, the Omaha's terminology is very well earned at this point. I mean, I think it's probably going to start turning derisive now after what happened this year and how many times they've been without getting it. But I do feel like Dave Van Horn has built such a solid program. And with what appears to be just the best infield in college baseball coming back, I would put them as one of the early favorites to win it next year.
Well, that's true. And they've also got one of their pitchers coming back, Hagen Smith, who's a freshman. That guy looks great.
That was dynamite.
Against Ole Miss. Yeah, so they definitely, you're right, they're knocking on the door. Florida State didn't even get out of the regional.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say that Arkansas is certainly much further along than them. And I just think that's going to happen at Arkansas before it does Florida State. But I just, I look to with what I've seen with Link Jarrett and how quickly he ascended Notre Dame with, I'm not going to say less resources because, of course, Notre Dame has got more money than God, pun intended. They also have, really good fan support. But Florida State, that is I want to say they're almost a baseball school. I mean, they're so good at everything when it comes to football and basketball, like over time. But if you look at historically, from a consistency standpoint, I would say their baseball program is their best program in Florida State. I've been to their campus. It's got a beautiful baseball stadium. And I kind of feel like now that you have this guy in here who, I mean, I'm not going to say that Mike Martin Jr. didn't earn the job, but he definitely got a huge, boon from the fact of who his dad was. Now you have a guy that's shown it somewhere else, that's brought a program that's not a baseball power into, everybody's living room, beating Tennessee, doing what they did to almost beat Mississippi State last year. And I feel like when you get the resources and the support he has at Florida State, I got to think he's going to win a national championship.
Well, it's kind of similar. I think Florida State, one reason, they wanted him in addition to the fact he's a hot commodity, it reminds me a little bit of Chris Lemonis taking the Mississippi State job. Because I think, he had been to Indiana, took them to a College World Series, I think, or was an assistant when they went to one. And so that was another, non-traditional team going to a College World Series in baseball and then going, to a top flight program and getting them over the hump. And so that's, obviously what Florida State is hoping for.
And Joe, that's a good point. I mean, Indiana is obviously another Midwest program. The Notre Dame is in the state of Indiana. Traditionally, the Midwest is not the best at baseball. You don't really see a whole lot of baseball teams from from the Big Ten or Notre Dame make the College World Series. I mean, I think I can remember the Indiana team doing it. I think Michigan's done it a couple times, and then Notre Dame's all I can really think of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm hard. It's hard for me to think of anybody. I remember Michigan. You're right, taking on Vanderbilt in the finals 3 years ago. But yeah, you just rarely ever see those teams make it.
That's right. So, Joe, I think it's going to be a success. And, I mean, I think this was this was a positive choice either way. I mean, he could have stayed at Notre Dame, and I think he could have, continued getting him there. Now, could they have won a national championship? I'm not sure. But now I definitely like his ability to get a national championship. And like I said, after having gone to their campus and seeing how much they care about baseball and seeing the support they have and having been close so many times, I'd like to see him win a national championship, and I think he's got a very good chance.
I mean, if he was ever going to go, this is the time to go, and this was the only place he was going to go to.
That's right. Well, and it seems like, now that Ole Miss has broken the hump and Mississippi State have broken the hump, those are two teams that both had really good baseball programs and passionate fan bases that weren't even near on the success level that Florida State was in terms of their history. So maybe that's a sign of, these teams that I would say are kind of second tier powers in college baseball, making that next step up to tier one. Maybe Florida State will take their rightful place back at the top of the baseball heat.
Right.
All right. And speaking of which, when we get back, we're going to talk about two other teams that took their place at the top of the heat. And we're going to, of course, talk about the NBA Finals champs, the Golden State Warriors, and the Stanley Cup champions, the Colorado Avalanche. I want to thank all of our listeners. You can catch all of our episodes on Spotify. You can, of course, also subscribe to our YouTube channel and watch our videos on the Dan and George Joe Sports Show channel on YouTube. And, of course, you can like us on Facebook and follow us at Twitter at DJ Sports Show. And as always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.